Hello, and welcome to Chapter 20, the lymphatic system and lymphoid organs and tissues. The lymphatic system returns fluids that have leaked from the vascular system back to the blood. It consists of three parts: lymphatic vessels, lymph, which is the fluid contained in those vessels, and the lymph nodes that cleanse the lymph as it passes through them. The lymphoid organs and tissues provide the structural basis of the immune system. They play essential roles in the body's defense mechanisms and its resistance to disease. These structures include the lymph nodes, the spleen, the thymus, the tonsils, and other lymphoid tissues that are scattered throughout the body. In your study of the cardiovascular system, you learned that blood circulates through the body, distributing nutrients, waste, and gases between the blood and the interstitial fluid. The hydrostatic and colloid osmotic pressures that you studied, operating at the capillary beds, force fluid out of the blood at the arterial ends and cause most of it to be reabsorbed at the venous ends. The fluid that remains behind in the tissue spaces, as much as 3 liters daily, becomes part of the interstitial fluid. This leaked fluid, plus any plasma proteins that may have escaped from the bloodstream, must somehow be returned to the blood to ensure that the cardiovascular system has sufficient blood volume. This problem is resolved by our lymphatic vessels. They are elaborate networks of drainage vessels that collect the excess protein-containing interstitial fluid and return it back to the bloodstream. Once the interstitial fluid enters the lymphatic vessels, it is called lymph. Lymph is known as clear water. The lymphatic vessels form a one-way system in which lymph flows only towards the heart. The transport of lymph begins in our microscopic blind-ended lymphatic capillaries. Our capillaries are widespread but happen to be absent from bones and teeth. Although our lymphatic capillaries are similar to our blood capillaries, they are remarkably permeable. This is due to their flap-like mini-valves and their collagen filaments. At any increase in interstitial fluid volume, our mini-valves will open. When fluid pressure in the interstitial space is greater than the pressure in the lymphatic capillary, the mini-valve flaps will open, allowing fluid to enter into the lymphatic capillary. When tissues become inflamed, lymphatic capillaries develop openings that permit uptake of even larger particles such as cell debris, disease-causing microorganisms such as bacteria and viruses, and also cancer cells. These particles will travel with the lymph to the lymph nodes, where they are removed by cells of our immune system. This is how the lymphatic system and the immune system work together to protect us. The process is critical for activating an immune response. A special set of lymphatic capillaries called lacteals transports absorbed fat from the small intestine to the bloodstream. Lacteals are so called because of the milky white lymph that drains through them. This fatty lymph, called chyle, drains from the finger-like villi of our intestinal mucosa. From the lymphatic capillaries, our lymph flows through successively larger and thicker walled channels. Lymph flows from our lymphatic capillaries to our collecting lymphatic vessels, from there into our lymphatic trunks, from our trunks into our ducts. The collecting lymphatic vessels have the same 3 tunics as our veins. The collecting lymphatic vessels have thinner walls and they have more internal valves than our veins. The largest collecting vessels unite to form trunks. Our lymphatic trunks drain fairly large areas of the body. The major trunks, named mostly for the regions from which they drain lymph, include the paired lumbar trunk, the paired bronchomediastinal trunk, the paired subclavian trunk, and the paired jugular trunk. We have a single intestinal trunk. Lymph is eventually delivered to one of two large ducts in the thoracic region. The right lymphatic duct and the larger thoracic duct. The right lymphatic duct is going to drain the lymph that's highlighted green, which includes the right upper limb, the right side of the head and neck, and the thorax region. The much larger thoracic duct is going to drain the area that is highlighted pink. It receives lymph from the rest of the body. It collects lymph from our two large lumbar trunks that drain the lower limbs, and from the intestinal trunk that drains our digestive organs, the left side of the head and neck region, and your left thorax. As the thoracic duct runs superiorly, it receives lymphatic drainage from the left side of the thorax, the left upper limb, and the left side of the head and neck that I just mentioned. Each terminal duct empties its lymph into the venous circulation at the junction of your internal jugular vein and subclavian veins on its own side of the body. The lymphatic system lacks an organ that acts as a pump. So it too is going to move lymph by the same mechanisms that promote venous return in our blood vessels. That includes the milking action of our active skeletal muscles, the pressure changes in our thorax during breathing, carried out by our respiratory system, and the valves that are found in the vessels to prevent backflow. To understand the role of our lymphoid organs in the body, we need to investigate their components, the lymphoid cells and the lymphoid tissues. The lymphoid cells consist of immune cells found in our lymphoid tissues. Those are our lymphocytes. They are warriors of our. There are two main types of lymphocytes. We have our T lymphocytes, also known as our T cells, and we have our B lymphocytes, known as our B cells, that protect the body against antigens. Recall that antigens are anything that provokes an immune response. This includes bacteria and their toxins, viruses, fungi, mismatched red blood cells, and even cancer cells. Activated T cells manage the immune response, and some of them can directly attack and destroy infected cells, while activated B cells protect the body by producing plasma cells. Our plasma cells can secrete antibodies into the blood. Other lymphoid cells include our macrophages that play a crucial role in body protection and the immune response by phagocytizing foreign substances and by helping to activate our T cells. We also have reticular cells that are fibroblast-like cells that produce reticular fibrostroma, which is the network that supports the other cell types in our lymphoid organs and tissues. Lymphoid tissue is an important component of our immune system as well. It houses our lymphocytes and provides a site where they can be activated and divide. Lymphoid tissue also provides a surveillance vantage point for our lymphocytes and our macrophages. Lymphoid tissue dominates all of our lymphoid organs except for the thymus. Our lymphoid tissue comes in two types. We have diffuse lymphoid tissue that is found in virtually every body organ. And we have our lymphoid follicles, or also called lymphoid nodules, that are solid spherical bodies that are found in our larger lymphoid organs, such as our lymph nodes. They are isolated aggregations of lymphoid follicles can occur in our intestinal wall as Peyer's patches and also in our appendix. The lymphoid organs can be grouped into our primary lymphoid organs and our secondary lymphoid organs. The primary lymphoid organs are where B and T cells mature. That will include your red bone marrow found in your long bones and your thymus. While both B and T cells originate and develop in our red bone marrow, it is our B cells that are the only ones that will mature here. Our T cells will mature in our thymus. Your secondary lymphoid organs are where mature lymphocytes first encounter their antigens and are activated to elicit an immune response. They include the lymph nodes, the spleen, our mucosa-associated lymphoid tissue, which will include our Peyer's patches and our small intestine, our appendix, and our tonsils. Although all lymphoid organs help protect the body, it is only the lymph nodes that cleanse the lymph. So let's discuss our lymph nodes. Our lymph nodes are the most important of the secondary lymphoid organs in the body. They are considered the principal lymphoid organ. They are going to cluster along the lymphatic vessels of the body. Large clusters of lymph nodes occur near the body surface in the inguinal region, your axillary region, and your cervical region. Our lymph nodes can perform two basic protective functions. They include cleansing the lymph. They're going to filter this fluid and also allow an immune system activation. Our lymph node takes on a bean-shaped structure. It is surrounded by a fibrous capsule. It has strands called trabeculae that bend inward to divide the node into compartments. It has a cortex region and a medulla region. Lymph enters the convex side of the lymph node through a number of afferent lymphatic vessels. It then moves through to the subscapular sinus, and it enters into the medulla region through the medullary sinuses, and then finally exits at the hilar region, which is this indented region on the concave side, and the lymph is going to exit via the efferent lymphatic vessels. Our afferent lymphatic vessels allow fluid to enter. Our efferent lymphatic vessels allows fluid to exit. You guys can see the valves listed here in those vessels that will prevent backflow of our lymphatic fluid. Sometimes our lymph nodes get overwhelmed by the agents that are trying to destroy. When large numbers of bacteria are trapped in the nodes, our lymph nodes can become inflamed, swollen, and tender to touch. This is a condition known as lymphadenopathy, which is swollen glands, which we can palpate, meaning touch, when we have a cold on the underside of our chin or behind our ear. The spleen is found in the left upper quadrant. It is about the size of the fist, and it is the largest lymphoid organ. It is served by our large splenic artery and splenic vein, which enter and exit the hilum region on the concave side of the spleen. The spleen provides a site for lymphocyte proliferation and immune system surveillance and response. It has a blood cleansing and filtering function. It's going to extract aged and defective red blood cells and platelets. Its macrophages remove debris and foreign matter. It can also recycle the breakdown products of our red blood cells. It stores blood platelets and monocytes released into the blood when needed. It can also serve as a site of erythrocyte production in our growing fetus in utero. And like lymph nodes, the spleen is surrounded by a fibrous capsule. It too has trabeculate that extends inward, and it has two components, the white pulp and the red pulp. The white pulp region is going to be where immune functions take place, and our red pulp region is where worn out red blood cells and blood-borne pathogens will be destroyed. Let's discuss the thymus. The thymus. The thymus is going to be one of your primary lymphoid organs. It is bilobed. It has important functions primarily during the early years of life. It is found in the inferior cervical neck region and extends into our superior thorax, where it partially overlies the heart, deep to the sternum, and anterior to the trachea. The thymus is going to be the site where our T lymphocytes will mature to become immunocompetent. The thymus is where our T lymphocytes become able to defend us against specific pathogens in our immune response. The thymus continues to increase in size through childhood where it's highly active. However, after puberty, it gradually atrophies, meaning it's smaller, and by old age, it has been replaced almost entirely by fibrous and fatty tissue and is difficult to distinguish from the surrounding connective tissue. Even though it atrophies and gets smaller as we get older, the thymus continues to produce immunocompetent cells as we get older, although it's at a declining rate that these cells are produced, but it's still able to do it for us. The thymus is going to differ from our secondary lymphoid organs in that the thymus has no follicles because it lacks B lymphocytes. The thymus also does not directly fight against antigens. It functions strictly to serve as a site of maturation for our T lymphocytes. Now let's discuss MALT. MALT. MALT stands for mucosa-associated lymphoid tissues. It is a set of distributed lymphoid tissues strategically located in our mucous membranes throughout the body. MALT helps protect us from the never-ending onslaught of disease-causing organisms that seek to enter our bodies. MALT includes our tonsils, the Peyer's patches, and the appendix. Let's discuss our tonsils. The tonsils form a ring of lymphoid tissue around the entrance of the pharynx, which is known as your throat. The tonsils are named according to their location. We have paired palatine tonsils that are located on either side at the posterior end of our oral cavity. These are our largest tonsils, and they are the ones that are most often infected and removed in childhood. We also have lingular tonsils. They are located at the base of our tongue. We have pharyngeal tonsils, also known as adenoids, when they're enlarged, and they are found on the posterior wall of the nasopharynx region. It is the pharyngeal tonsils that are also removed if we get our palatine tonsils removed. And last, we have our tubal tonsils surrounding the openings of your auditory tubes into the pharynx. The tonsils can gather and remove many of the pathogens entering the pharynx in food or inhaled air. Our tonsils contain tonsillar crypts that trap bacteria and particulate matter, and the bacteria works their way through the mucosal epithelium into the lymphoid tissue where most are destroyed. Moving on to our Peyer's patches. They are aggregated lymphoid nodules found in large clusters in our small intestines. And now to our appendix, which is a tubular offshoot of the first part of the large intestine, the cecum region. The appendix is in an ideal position to prevent bacteria from breaching the intestinal wall and also to generate memory for long-term immunity. Here is a summary slide of our lymphoid organs and tissues. Please recall what our functions are and their special features. By the 5th week of embryonic development, the beginnings of our lymphatic vessels and the main lymph node clusters are apparent. Except for the thymus, which is an endodermal derivative, the lymphoid organs develop from mesoderm. Thank you, and hope you have enjoyed your lymphatic system.